Okay, and we are live. So we are back and we're going to be getting an overview from Vermont Legal Aid. So welcome. Thank you. Welcome.
So
You were part of Legal Aid.
So I'm Mike Fisher, healthcare advocate.
And for the record, Rachel Seelig, I'm the director of our Disability Law Project and our staff attorney for government relations. So I have two jobs right now, and one of them is to be here for all of you.
So I spent a while talking to you yesterday. Was that just yesterday?
Yeah.
It was. It does seem longer.
So in a little bit of a different capacity, we're here to give you an overview of legal aid and to and really particularly talk to you about our service, our support for you in constituent service. I always want to say this, we do our very best to respond to Vermonters the same, whether they come through come through a person of perceived power or whether they come directly to us. But there's something about the people who come to us through their legislator. They're a little bit more desperate. They're a little bit that don't know where to turn. And so absolutely, we want to be responsive to your needs in serving your constituents well. But we also want your help in reaching people in your communities who really need it. So in the past, it's been Wendy Morgan and I in the building for the last couple of years. Wendy's got another job at the moment.
I saw her coming in the building this morning.
Well, we had our breakfast this morning, so she had our interim executive director was able to make it, but that is more than a full-time job as well.
Wow.
So
She retired, right? This is her retirement.
This is her retirement from the Attorney General's office, yeah.
so this year I get to share the role with Rachel Seelig, and so Rachel will talk a little bit more about the rest of legal aid, but we really want to be available to you. You can speak to either one of us about any constituent concern you have, and we'll get them to the right place at legal aid.
Okay.
So one of the nice things in this community is we really have new folks, so you probably already know at least a little bit about who we are and what we do. Vermont Legal Aid is the largest civil legal aid provider in the state of Vermont. We have offices in Montpelier, Burlington, Rutland, Springfield, and St. Johnsbury. We're organized into 11 different projects at this point, and I'm going to hand out to you a short description of each of those projects. I'll email it to Jill as well, so for those of you who don't prefer paper, you can have it electronically. This also has the names and contact information for each of our project directors. You don't really need to understand how we're organized. Again, as Mike said, if you have a constituent who needs help, come to me, come to Mike. If you want someone from Legal Aid in to talk about something that the elder law unit might be somebody you're interested in, still come to us. We'll make sure that you connect to the right person. But we want you to have that in case there is something where you want to reach out to them directly. So I will pass those.
You email that, it will be on our website.
So we've been asking committees not to put it on the website because it has our phone numbers and our email addresses on it. But we have no problem with all of you having access to it. And how important that actually is, given how much we try and be accessible to the public, it's a little bit of a question mark.
I think we understand how to manage.
Yes. Yes. So Vermont Legal Aid, I think, has a perception of only serving very low-income Vermonters, and while we absolutely do that, one of the things I've been trying to make sure folks understand is that we have many projects that are not income limited. And so you may have constituents who have a child with special needs who isn't getting what they need from their school district. My project, the Disability Law Project, is not income limited. We may be able to help that family, regardless of income. Mike's project is another one that's not income limited.
In fact, most
of our projects are not income limited. And so that's something that I think is a perception, and we've been trying to make sure folks know. If you think that someone might need our help, err on the side of asking, because that we really do want to be that helpful constituent service aid. Mike and I have done this in a few different committees now, and I'm gonna steal one of the things that he sometimes talks about, which is you're all very busy trying to set policy, especially in this committee, figuring out the tax system for the state. And you also have this demand of constituents coming to you looking for your help. I spent 2.5 years working in Congressman Welch's office doing constituent service. Wonderful experience. You don't have the luxury of having a whole team of people to do constituent service for you. And so that is a place where, especially on the legal issues, the healthcare issues, the housing issues, you know, we really do want to be here to be a support for you. So that's a very quick overview, and I thought I'd pause there and see if you have any questions, and then if we've got time, happy to talk about a couple of different policy issues that might very well touch your committee.
We just are notifying our next person that we're running a few minutes late.
Oh, awesome.
So are there any questions? Okay. Tell us about what you're looking at.
Sure. So one of the projects that we've set up over the course of the pandemic is a homeowners legal assistance project, which is helping to prevent foreclosures, which is great work. One of the things that they have come across and that they are recommending, and the taxpayer advocate is also in support of, is moving the late filing deadline for the property tax credit claim.
The taxpayer advocate is our next witness.
Perfect. Excellent. We love when we have.
There
There you are.
Well, we're texting you, telling you we're running late.
Yeah.
Good to know.
So our team has been talking with Jeff about this idea of moving the deadline, and I think it's something that we're in agreement with, that makes sense to move from October 15th to March 15th of the next year. And also to create a notice that town clerks send out to homeowners to let them know about the property tax credit.
You just made this.
We're gonna talk, we're gonna see Senator Ron Lansdale on Friday, and then we're gonna bring this up with her committee as well.
Yeah, but you just said town clerks will, and
So
that gets complicated.
the idea here is a very simple notice, and the reason that it's so important is that there are a lot of Vermonters who are homeowners, but are so low income or only receive Social Security, they don't have to be tax filers. And so they don't get that benefit. And we have stories of folks who, you know, we have someone who moved home to take care of their elderly father, was so busy taking care of, missed their April filing taxes, didn't have to file taxes in April, didn't realize that the property tax bill had doubled until after the October 15th deadline. And the only option is to go to Jeff and try and get case by case relief. And so we think a notice would help folks know. And then the extended deadline would also avoid that issue of the only option is
I
case by
think
case.
when we first did this, we moved that every year there was a real heart-rending story of somebody that missed. And finally, we just said, it's gotta stay somewhere for some amount of time.
Yeah.
So, it's been a while, so it might be time to move it again.
Yeah.
But I also want to hear
Well-
because there's penalties and yes.
Yeah, and I don't think the proposal is to eliminate the penalty,
Right.
but just to still be able to file even with the penalty. So that's one that I think fits squarely with you all. And then there is a lot that we are supporting in human services and that will require funding. And so we know that's appropriations, but we know that's also going to come here to figure out how to pay for it.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So just a couple of things that I was talking with Senate Health and Welfare about this morning. Reach Up, creating a plan to reduce and then eliminate the rateable reduction, and have a more realistic budget for those. And right now the housing allowance on that is about $400.
Yes. I know Senator Bass has been near and dear to Senator Kitchell's heart. We got
Yeah.
something last year.
Got
maybe
some
the last
progress
2
last
years,
couple of
but
years.
it comes out of the general fund, and it's one of those things, like a lot of home and community-based services, that when you get to the end and you want to balance the budget. You level fund them or you don't go up, and we know.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
That it's a problem, and yes, COVID has just made that horribly clear right now. If no one else is aware of it, the schools most certainly are.
Absolutely.
The level of violence that's being seen in the schools is frightening.
Well, and I think it's a real reflection of the increased need for mental health services, not just in schools, but in our communities. And that actually, I think, connects to number two, which is, the designated agencies and the vacancy rate in those agencies right now. We've had clients on the intellectual and developmental disability side of those agencies that have gone without any services for more than 2 years now. These are folks where their parents have had to leave the workforce in order to take care of them 24/7. Some of these folks can only communicate with assistance for typing. They haven't had that, so they've been cut off from communication. And so, finding a way to appropriate and fund those programs so that these folks are not in, quite frankly, unsafe and unsustainable positions. We have some clients who have been living in a motel for more than a year because no one can find them a shared living provider to live with. So that's another one that we know is gonna come here to figure out some funding beyond just the global commitment, I think is just the reality.
Yeah. Come here, but it definitely is going to come through this building.
Yes, comes through this. And connected to that is general assistance and emergency assistance, which I know has been a topic of conversation across committees. And the costs of homelessness, of unsheltered homelessness, are so much higher than the costs of sheltered homelessness. And I think Senator Cummings, you participated in an event with disability advocates before the session started, where we were talking about all of these things, and I think you gave us a little bit of a reality check of they're all very important, and how do we, it really comes down to the dollars.
It does, and COVID, we slid by for years, but COVID, having people isolated in their homes is not good for their mental health. We know we had children who were high risk and were then in their homes, did not have broadband. No one saw them for a year.
Yeah.
And I would not be surprised if they are not a good part of what we're seeing in acting out in schools. I think we're seeing it across the country, and it's frightening to think that we are one of the better mental health states in providing services. But yeah, it's out there, and the budget is presented to us.
There's a lot of work to do.
There's a lot of work to do. That's what isn't in the budget. So, yeah.
So those are some of our top priorities, and I imagine that Mike has already talked to you about the
I
healthcare
think I mentioned the
priorities.
healthcare one
Yes,
too.
So that may come here. I think those are the ones that probably are highest on our list. We've got some other things going on. We always love talking policy with folks, but
Okay.
that's kind of where we're at, what we're doing, and we'd love to be helpful again in any way that we can.
All right. Any questions? Senator Brock? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. We will talk to you some more.
Absolutely. Stick around, listen to Jeff's presentation.
We can switch chairs. One of the things about being out of here for 3 years is there are new people, and I don't know if the taxpayer, the advocate has ever been in here.
It's been, I think it was pre-COVID, it was the last time I was in here, so.
And probably when I wasn't here.
I believe so.
Yeah, it was probably during my hiatus. But I read your report and said, you've got some good ideas for us, so I'm gonna have you in and see These are the kinds of things that frequently get put on the miscellaneous tax bill.
Yes, I don't believe my proposal this year. Well, first of all, my name is Jeff Dooley. I'm a taxpayer advocate for the Vermont Department of Taxes. Let me just give you a quick overview of my position. It was created by the Commissioner of Taxes in 2001 and subsequently codified into law. I'll spare you reading directly from the statute, but basically, my role has two levels, a macro level and a micro level. I'm kind of the macro level. I serve as the voice of the taxpayer within the Department of Taxes. So whenever the department's making decisions on new policies or changing policies or anything like that, I try to act as the voice of the taxpayer. How is this going to affect them? Is it going to make people harder? Cause people problems filing, make it hard to know their responsibilities, things like that. In addition, as that macro role, I do present in front of the Ways and Means Committee and this committee with any legislative proposals that I have. And both of your committees have been very good to me over the last few years. Almost all of my proposals in previous years have gone into law, so I'm very appreciative of that. And then I also have a more micro role where when someone who's dealing with the tax department, their case or issue goes off the rails, they can't get someone to call them back, they feel that they're being treated unfairly, something like that, they can come to me and I could try to get them back on track with what they're doing with the department. And then also there is a program in statute called extraordinary relief. And what that is when someone feels that the letter of the law is applying to them in a way that's unfair, unforeseen, or is going to create a significant financial hardship. They bring their issue to me. I look into it, summarize it for the commissioner, and then he can choose to use his powers to approve or deny that request. The vast majority of those requests that I deal with are around the property tax credit and people who have missed the deadline or filled out the form incorrectly. So most of the work that I've done since I've been in this position in 2016 have been around the property tax credit. And so with that, I will move into my major statutory proposal this year is moving the late file deadline from October 15th to March 15th with a $150 penalty if it's filed between October and March. And crucially, the way that my proposal is set out is the towns will not be involved in this process at all. It'll effectively work the same way that extraordinary relief works now, only it'll be streamlined through the department. Not everyone will have to go through me. So towns won't have to adjust their grand list.
Because that was what I was just thinking. There's an issue with the towns and their grand lists.
Yeah, so I'm very cognizant of that. So I tried to, I believe I succeeded in crafting the proposal in a way that takes the towns out of the equation entirely. If the person files between October 15th and March 15th, we'll take that $150 penalty, leave that in the ed fund, and then send a check directly to the taxpayer of what would have gone to the town. And then they can work with their town or with their mortgage company if that's what they have to work with in order to correct that. And I've laid out some of the reasons why this would be helpful. One of the ones that some people may not realize is a lot of people pay their taxes through their mortgage company's escrow account, and different financial institutions update their escrow accounts at different times. Some of them don't do it till January, till the beginning of the year. And so the person never looks at their property tax bill. They assume that the money went to the town, and then all of a sudden in January, they get a notice from their mortgage company saying, hey, your mortgage is going up $500 a month because you have a shortfall in your escrow account. And then the person calls me panicked, afraid that they're going to have their house foreclosed upon. And so that's why I picked the March 15th date, because almost all the requests that come to me between the beginning of November and March 15th. There may be one or two a year that come to me after March 15th, but that's really the exception rather than the rule. So this would catch all those individuals that are now going through me in a very manual process and have to wait, because I'm an office of one. I have to go through all these manually. It could take 4 to 6 weeks for me to review these, get these to the commissioner, and if he approves it, get it down. So someone could be stressed about this for, 2 months before they get a resolution. And these really are people who can't afford this increase in their mortgage or property taxes. I had one person call me between Christmas and New Year's this year, panicked, and when I got a hold of him and explained the extraordinary relief process, he was very appreciative and said, good, I haven't been able to eat for the last 3 days. I've been so worried about this. And that's not an uncommon sentiment that I hear. These individuals are really panicked and really afraid.
What happens in November that starts the panic?
Well, that's usually when they first realize that they missed the deadline. Either they go to pay their property taxes for the
Right,
first
the
time.
November payment, but that's usually the second.
It varies from town to town.
I know, towns have all kinds of different payment schedules.
Yeah, usually it's because, honestly, it's because the deadline is October 15th. And so usually if someone misses that deadline, it's not for a week or two later. Or if they realize in late October, it takes them calling the town and it takes them a week or two to figure out what the problem really is, why their payment went up so much.
Is that it goes up and stays up, or just until the arrearage is?
No, it's for the year.
Well, for the escrow, are you asking?
Yeah.
That it can cause problems for a while. It can affect people's mortgage payments for years. Usually, and it varies from financial institution to financial institution. I try to tell people that once you get this check from the state of Vermont, if you get the extraordinary relief, that go work with your mortgage company, explain what happened, and that this was a 1-year thing, and you're paying down the escrow, and it'll be back down to the lower amount the next year. And a lot of financial institutions will respect that and lower the amount. Some don't until they get the next property tax bill the previous year. I have, in circumstances where the mortgage company is being stubborn, written letters to, because of confidentiality, I have to write it to the taxpayer, not to the mortgage company, but write it to the taxpayer saying, this is what happened, and we expect your property tax payment to go down the next year because of this issue. And then they provide that to the mortgage company, and the mortgage company hopefully then takes that and lowers the
Are they made whole?
The taxpayer.
Yeah.
We usually charge a penalty, but minus that penalty, they receive everything they would have if they had filed on time. Of course, there could be, if they're dealing with the town, there could be interest issues if they're not able to make the first or second payment, but then that's between the taxpayer and the town, unfortunately.
But it's not their fault, it's the bank that screwed up.
No, in situations where a financial institution is involved, the bank is still paying the property taxes, so there wouldn't be any interest in that situation. It would just be that their mortgage went up, and then then it's up to them to work with their mortgage company to get themselves hopefully to where they would have been if they filed on time.
Because most mortgages now, very few are held by your local banks.
Right.
Getting a mortgage that understands Vermont's property tax system with a local bank, they understand. Trying to deal with a national bank that has bought a mortgage. I did this as an estate, and just trying to pay off the mortgage and try and explain that the person was dead and that the mortgage was in the courts, and that they would be paid as soon as the estate was settled. But you never got to talk to a person. You never got to talk to the same person. and I'm probably more used to this kind of thing than your average taxpayer. But it would be very frustrating, and your bank wants to make sure that your house doesn't go to tax sale. So they are going to be very cautious about making sure that you pay it. But if you are there where you don't have the money to essentially overpay, I don't know, well, yeah, it would depend on your bank, if that overpayment could be credited to next year or credited to your principal, or who knows? But, yeah.
First of all, it's great to know that you exist, and it does not surprise me that your attention is focused on property taxes. I can completely relate, and property taxes for new homeowners can be catastrophic to managing your monthly budgets. One thing that on my 8 years with City Council that I'd be curious if you've intersected and it touches upon this subject is the escrow accounts with banks are really doing what I think municipalities should do, which is effectively making the property taxes this huge amount of money paid on a monthly basis. I wish our municipalities made it a lot easier for those maybe that don't have a note but still need to manage their budget, facilitated monthly payments of their property taxes, or at least presented the bill on a monthly basis and could set up direct deposit. But even in the city of South Burlington, the second largest municipality in the state, that was very difficult. But I pay all my bills on a monthly basis. My electricity monthly, my gas monthly, everything's monthly, because that's how we manage our budgets. The quarterly piece, or even triangularly, is very challenging for the taxpayer.
If you add up the interest many people pay on their credit card, but you don't add that, if you had to pay that once a year, you'd go into shock for many people. You don't notice your income tax because it comes out on a monthly or weekly basis. Property tax is primarily problematic because you have to write 1, 2, or 3 big checks. And for some people, I have one lady who every time she did a load of wash, she put a quarter in a bucket, and that was her property tax. It's a lot of washing. But yeah, it's like the Christmas club, and she didn't get any interest on that. But for people, especially for people who are not really sophisticated, or people who come into town to take care of someone. And it's not rare to have family come home for Christmas and realize that one or both parents are a lot farther along in dementia than they realized and really need to do something right away. Filing your homestead declaration, nobody does that other than Vermont, so you don't think of it. It's like paying your sales tax on January 25th.
That's definitely true, and I mean, for the majority of people, when this is going right, they file these forms when they file their personal income tax in the spring, and so yeah, the farthest thing from their mind in March is the October property tax payment that they're going to make, and how this one affects the other.
But we saw that when we do the income education tax study, there are 17,000 Vermonters that do not file an income tax, which are generally your lowest income people. They don't owe it. A lot of them are seniors living on Social Security, and they're not making enough to owe any tax. And they are the ones who may be living in the family home or double wide or single wide, who suddenly realize they've got this. Of course, in some towns, it could be a decrease. I don't think they complain.
Well, that's the homestead versus non-homestead, but the property tax credit is the big chunk that usually trips people up. And yeah, there's a number of factors. Someone has the whole time that they've had to pay personal income tax, they say use TurboTax, and TurboTax walks them through with property tax credit forms while they're going through it. So the first year that they don't have a filing requirements, they don't go into TurboTax because they're thinking, well, I don't have to pay taxes this year. But they don't think that, oh, I also do this other form when I'm in there. And the dementia thing, I've seen it a number of times where, it's a couple, the wife does the taxes every year, and it's not until after they miss the deadline or whatever that she's diagnosed with having dementia or something like that. And
We don't have, because, like for my long-term care insurance, and I think for several other, like utility bills, but I know insurance, there's another name on the policy. So my daughter, if we don't pay on time, my daughter will get a call just because people, when they need that insurance the most, or when they are most likely to forget payment, and if it gets canceled, all the money you've put in all those years is gone. So there is backup to make sure that somebody, if you don't pay every year, probably, there you go again. But a lot of people paid for 50, 60 years and then get sick, are in the hospital, have dementia, and they miss deadlines, and there's a huge penalty there. So something to look at. You also mentioned the form.
yes.
The form is, the homestead is,
Well, it's one for, there's the HS 122, which is the homestead declaration, but then it also has Part B, which is the property tax credit. So both things are on the same form, which creates some confusion. I would say 90% of Vermonters conflate the two and think that the payment that they get every year from the state is their homestead declaration payment. They don't know that it's separate from the homestead versus non-homestead rate.
so I think I'm over the income limit because I was right there last year and I got a raise, I might not file at all.
That could happen. And unfortunately, there's nothing my office can do in those situations because that's at the town level and the towns just won't adjust homestead versus non-homestead after October 15th, no matter what. So the only thing I can work with is the property tax credit because that is something that the state administers. But just a quick briefly into my long-term consideration. I don't have a specific proposal for this, but it goes into everything that we've been talking about. It's this program is really, it's great for who it works for, but it's one of the most complicated programs we have. The people who benefit the most from it are the lowest income and least able to get assistance filling out their forms. The consequences when someone misses this are really dire to a lot of the lower income people. Really anything we could do to simplify or reform this program in the long term to make it something that's less complicated and easier for people to understand and to comply with. I mean, I have the same conversation dozens of times, and it usually takes 2 or 3 times trying to explain it because they're saying, well, I missed my 2021 homestead declaration. I was like, no, you missed your 2022 homestead declaration, but it's based on your 2021 income and it applies to your 2022 and 2023 property taxes. And even trying to explain it to someone who works at the Department of Taxes who doesn't work in this area, it's difficult trying to explain it to someone.
But it is better than when we sent you a check, and then
True.
asked you to send it back when you didn't qualify for the rebate.
True. But yeah, so I
Oh, I do have a question, but I didn't know when that was we sent a tag.
That was the first year or 2 that we did it,
Okay.
and we went to the last year's income tax and there was a cost and the state said, we'll swallow the cost, as opposed to the fury of people being told that they had to send back the money that the state sent them 6 months ago.
There are individuals who still call me up and say, I think I didn't get my prebate. Well, we don't have a prebate anymore.
That was 20 years, but yeah.
Well, I was curious if you're starting to see people who speak English as another language reaching out to you. That's a population I'm very worried about. They also unlock a lot of potential for changing things so that they're in plain English and they make more sense. That's happened with report cards in school districts, the number of processes asking people, you know, who haven't already accepted that this country is really complicated and these systems make no sense, yields really good results. So I don't know if there's some kind of working group you could lead if we supported that to make this more accessible and make it more friendly to people from other countries at the same time.
Definitely. I know that there's some individuals in our department, sorry, her last name, Elizabeth, is working with Susanna in the diversity office to try to improve our programs and being able to work with people who speak English as a second language in some underserved populations. And we also, I'm working with our communications team to try to figure out ways that we can try to reach some of those populations that may not have a filing requirement. And also I know that that there is some confusion, I think, because when I was even talking with someone with legal aid, they were like, well, could we expand this program to be people who are just residents of Vermont, but they may not be citizens of this country? Well, it's already available to that. And then there was a follow-up question being like, well, what if they're concerned that you're going to communicate with INS or someone like that if they file? And I can tell you that we are very protective of our tax information. We don't share information unless we absolutely have to, so we would never do that. But I could see where there would be a perception or a fear that filing this form could result in someone getting into trouble.
The government is not always looked at as a entity that is here to help you.
Understood. But so, yeah, I think it is something that we're taking a look at. And yeah, since I've been in this position, that is one of the populations that I have dealt with for, I guess, fairly obvious reasons. If it's hard for someone who speaks English as their first language to understand this program, I can only imagine trying to understand this if English is not your native language. So yeah, it is something that we are trying to work on. The struggle always with taxes is that they are very technical and kind of by nature, because it's very precise in law. And so some of our forms and our instructions have to be very precise. But we are trying to do things with like videos and other educational materials outside of our forms and instructions to try to take a more plain language approach for someone who's trying to get that information, who might not be able to understand.
And translated videos too, I hope, at some point.
At some point, yes.
Is that on your like timeline in any way?
I couldn't give you a timeline right now, but it is something that we've begun looking at, and I know that it is, discussions have begun on that. I don't know. Probably not by the end of this calendar year, but I would hope in 2024 we would be starting that.
Okay, so part of your recommendation in the report we got was that we graduate the penalties.
No, I you might have been looking at last year's. Last year did have a graduated penalty.
Oh, it was sort of the thing I had.
Oh, it's,
I don't see that report on the committee page.
I think it got emailed. I don't know that came to the committee, but if you send it to Jill, we can put it up.
okay, yeah, I'll send you this one, but this one just has a flat $150 penalty if it's filed.
What is it now?
Right now, well, Right now, it goes through extraordinary relief. So the commissioner actually will usually put a $250 penalty on it. I scaled it down a little bit. And unless in certain circumstances, there will be no penalty. So for example, someone will go and have their tax return prepared by a volunteer at one of the VITA clinics, and the volunteer makes a mistake and doesn't file this form. Well, in those situations, well, the taxpayer thought that they had their form filed and they didn't, that there was no way that they could have known that the volunteer didn't file the form correctly. So in those situations, we usually won't charge a penalty. But if the person just missed the deadline and there wasn't, it was low income and just missed the deadline, put a $250 penalty on there. If there's aggravating factors, then we will waive the penalty in certain circumstances.
Okay. So that gives us something to work with. The form is complicated. Any thoughts about how we could make it less complicated, and not lose money?
Potentially. The problem is the statute's really complicated. And that's where our form comes from. And we've looked at this, and if you look at the statute, it basically starts with adjusted gross income, and then it says, but not this, but plus this, plus that.
Yeah.
So we have to do all that adding and subtracting on our form. I think we looked back about 5-6 years ago, we looked at the definition of modified adjusted gross income for the purposes of for one of the federal healthcare programs. And it was basically adjusted gross income plus and minus, I think, 3 different categories of income. And then we looked at our household income, which is adjusted gross income. And I think at the time, and I think it still is, plus or minus 26 different types of income at the federal level. So that kind of gives you an idea of how complicated it is. So really, the only way I can think of to simplify the form would really be to go into the statute and take away some of those additions and
Well, that's what I'm
and
thinking. If, again, when we went to using last year's income, knowing that this year some people may have higher income in good times, most people might have higher income. To do away with the complexity, it was decided, you did a little cost benefit thing and decided it was worth it. For what we're picking up, for every grandma that moves in with $100 million worth of income coming into the household versus the teenage son that's got a part-time job. If there's some way you could look at those forms and see what, if we're not catching any significant amount of income, then it might be easier to just take it off.
I can definitely look at that.
Yeah.
Full disclosure, for Representative Ansel, who was the chair of Ways and Means, was
Yes.
very opposed to tinkering within.
Yes,
this
I'm sure she
issue.
was, but she's not there anymore.
I know, so that is why I learned not to make
She
those
doesn't like
proposals, but
kids either.
yeah, but if you're willing to look at that, I'd certainly be
I'm
willing
definitely
to
willing to look at it.
go into the statute.
I think if we could, because the biggest complaint is that it is complicated. I think we found when we went to looking at income as a base for education taxes, the minute you tried to be fair, it got complicated. And so anything we can do to make it less complicated. Representative Ansel was the lead on rewriting the tax code in, was it 2017, 18, and we made it hopefully less complicated for Vermonters to do their Vermont tax form.
Yeah, and yes, I agree. I think that just the amount of administrative burden and cost on the department that it would lessen in order to simplify these forms, because this is by far the program that our staff spends the most time administering. Obviously, it's a much smaller population than our personal income tax population. We spend more time on this, and and the people who are usually getting, or at least I'm seeing that we're getting it, it's not the person who's wealthy, whatever came to live with them. It's this person was in a bad domestic situation and stayed at my house for 5 months because they need to get out of their house, and now they have $20,000 more in their household income that's lessening their property taxes. And I mean, I don't think that was who it was intended to hit.
And we actually did do something that if you took a refugee family in, that their income did not count.
Yes.
Um,
So I think simplifying this, and yeah, and again, we're hitting the most vulnerable people, and getting $500 here, $1,500 there. I would much rather see us spending less time on this program and more time on looking at corporate income tax or some of these other places where there probably could be tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of underreporting. So that would be.
That would be Representative Ansel happy.
Yes.
There's another piece of this that often goes underutilized, which is the renters rebate. We're even, as we talk about an income-based, education finance system, we're talking about a big component for double payment from renters being the rebate. But do you keep track of figures about how many eligible people take that out? Because it's very, very few, as I understand.
I don't have the department does have that number. I don't have it with me, but it's probably one of our most underutilized
But
programs.
it just went in last year, right?
Well, it has been simplified, so
Yes,
that
it
is good.
has been
Simplification.
greatly simplified.
So we hopefully will get data that tells us how to
Yeah,
improve the
and
situation.
I'm assuming it'll take a couple years to roll it out, and get the word out that you don't have to go find your landlord that lives in New York to get him to sign off. And it's a formula, and for right now, it really is a rental assistance program. It's pretty much decoupled from your property.
Yeah, and I mean, ideally, in my perfect world, I think we would move the property tax credit to a low-income housing subsidy. I think that would be probably the easier way, and just decoupling it from the tax department. But I realize that's a huge lift and probably not gonna. I might not see it happen in my lifetime.
Well, if you had to stay here all year, we might do that. That would be.
But no, I think what we did with the renter credits was a good step forward, and if we can move to make this simpler, I definitely would be for it, and I definitely will look at our statute and see what can be
Take
cleaned
a
up.
look at it, take a look at the numbers, and if it's a de minimis amount we're picking up, if we cut out or just raise the limit to leave out the millionaire grandmother that moves in.
What I can tell you that I've noticed anecdotally is when changes have been made to the statute is it has been based on, again, anecdotes where someone says, well, I know this person in my town who's in this situation, and that creates an unfair result. Either they're paying too much or they're paying too little. And then a change gets made to the law to address that one situation. But now to help 5 people in the state, you've made it more complicated for
Right, and
100,000.
that was one of the issues with moving the date of to file, because, and I got in a lot of trouble with the senator, because this was like the 3rd or 4th year in a row that some senator had some constituent that had a really terrible story, and we moved the deadline, we moved it up generally to help the widow who, but the result was the deadline kept moving, so no one didn't have time to figure out when it was. And I said, for people that are savvy enough to know they can call their legislator and get the date, well, they get something done. But the rest of the people who don't feel they have that power, they're lost. So,
I was here for that. I'm trying to remember.
yeah, Sears got very angry.
Sure, last stop.
Was that?
Was the last time you stopped here?
Last time he stopped.
Okay, so yeah, if you do that, this is the kind of thing. And if you're gonna talk to the House, if you haven't already, I'm trying to remember to mention this at Money Chance next week, so we're looking at trying to simplify that form. Because, yeah, everybody says, well, I've got it, she got divorced, and, and somebody took in a homeless person, and it gets very complicated. It's another address.
What have we done now about that? When I was here previously, we were dealing with the people who take in the aged parent. The aged parent. You take in.
If the aging parent has more than, I forget the number now, in income, it gets counted in the household income, because the theory is grandpa's getting his social security check, and he may be getting a pension check, and he may have a lot of dividend checks coming in, and that's money that is available to pay the property.
However it got there, you're calculating ability to pay, and the money is there.
It's money that's there, and we've raised it because the kid with the paper route, do you really wanna, or, the high school kid who is either saving for college, or sometimes that money is necessary for support of the family. And so we've got it up, and is it somewhere around 20 or 30,000 now?
Oh,
We've raised it.
yeah, I got to
It
look.
used to be something like 7,000.
What was?
What your kid who works can earn before it gets counted as, and there are families. There were a lot of immigrant families, like when our parents and grandparents, where the kids worked and the money went into the kitty jar, and that was the food. And I'm sure there are immigrant families now, I know there are, where the same thing happens. But for an awful lot of middle-class kids, that paper route money, and that we don't have paper boys anymore either, was how you learn to be responsible and have a job and handle money when you were 14 years old.
So I bought my first car.
Well, that's how my son got his job at the Grand Union, and then he could afford to go to Europe on his gap year.
Wow.
He saved his money. Okay,
I charge $100 a year.
thank you. And if you can get those calculations, we'll take a look at,
Did you work on the renters?
I did not work directly on that, no.
Well, they did the yeoman's.
No, I think I have a great change to the law.
and I think that's one of the issues with the income for education is we just started this, and it seemed like such a good idea to we dismantle it. And that just adds to confusion too.
Yeah.
So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Committee. Well, we got one bill, so we're gonna have work to do, but I think that is it for the day. Senator Brock, I hope you're feeling better.
Thank you very much. I'm sure you're all grateful that I'm not in the room coughing on you.
Probably Senator Watson is out too, so, and DMR is sick, and
Well, it's interesting, in the 2.5 years that we've had COVID, I have not had a cold, bronchial infection, or any of those other things. And I'm seeing that we're back now, and this is our reward.
well, I do still have the power to require masks in here, I'm told, so there may be advantages to that.
Yeah.
And no, I was thinking, I could never remember you being sick.
No,
Iron Man.
Well, despite all the talk about petri dishes in these rooms, this room has stayed relatively healthy. Okay.
bye, everybody.
Hopefully sometime we will see you.
Hopefully tomorrow, we'll see what the morning shows.
Well, yeah, what's the weather?
More snaps.
Yeah, it's more snow, I guess, most of the night, but it's supposed to clear up or begin clearing tomorrow morning.
Okay. We will see.
Might be a day of slow driving.
Yeah, the snow is picking up, so
Yeah.
I think we can go offline.